And we're just over halfway through the election campaign. Less than 3 weeks to go now till polling day. The parties are back out on the trail this morning, fighting for every vote.
We're joined now by the Defence Secretary, Grant Shapps. Morning to you, Mr Shapps.
Good morning.
I just want to start by reminding you of something you said yourself quite recently. Last week, you said that people should vote Conservative to stop Labour from winning a super majority. Have you given up any hope of actually winning this election?
No, not at all. And I stand by that. But actually, what wasn't quoted there was what I said before it, which was that we're still fighting for every single vote. Just as you said, we're out on the doorsteps throughout the country, making our case, fighting for votes. It was put to me about whatever the latest opinion poll was at the time, and I made the point, which I stick with, that giving Keir Starmer a blank check or even a supermajority would be very bad for this country. It would be very bad for people's taxes on their homes, where they'll do a revaluation, on their jobs, where they won't introduce the national insurance cut, on their cars and on their pensions, where they've already said they won't protect pensions from being taxed, the state pension. So Labour is going to cost a lot in taxes. It's right to warn about that. And I think an unchecked majority would be very bad news, because they said yesterday they haven't even put everything in the manifesto. There are more tax rises effectively to come through increased spending.
OK, we'll come on to that in just a moment. But your party, I know, has continued to tout the line that Labour would cost families £2,000, an extra £2,000, even though the Office for Statistics Regulation has warned that that would be misleading. Why do you continue to use that number?
So actually, I just posted on Twitter, or my X account, precisely how that is made up. It's £2,094. And your viewers are welcome to go and have a look at it at Grant Shapps on Twitter right now, and you'll see how that 2,094 is made up. The numbers from primarily actually Labour's own costings, checks by Treasury officials in most cases, and one independent source. So what you'll find on there is this all stacks up. There are £2,094 of additional burden for the average working household in this country. Go and check it out and see it for yourself.
OK, over how long?
Over 4 years. That's the period in time that they have set their projections. But as I mentioned just now, we now know from their spokesman for health, Wes Streeting, as he said yesterday, that's just the start of our plans, he said. And so it's clear that they are holding back and hiding further spending. For example, we know in Wales, Labour have revalued homes. So that means changing people's council tax bands. So look out for your council tax band to change and to add additional tax to you. We know that they won't ensure that pensions remain tax-free, the state pension. That will be additional tax. And people will remember when Gordon Brown raided private pensions, 160 billion, I think it was, when he was in power. We think they have all of these plans again, and we're out there reminding people that Labour will cost you a lot more money.
We spoke to Labour just a short time ago. Jonathan Ashworth said on this programme, when John here asked him about changing the council tax bands, I quote him directly to you, he says, "That is not our policy."
So, by the way, I don't remember them ever flagging it up in Wales either, but they did it. And similarly with things like the pensions, this is the worrying thing. We can see their spending plans, and that's why we've been able to set up 2,094 that we were just talking about. Is on my Twitter page if people want to see the video. So we've set that out. Labour can't explain how they're going to pay for their plans. For example, they don't think there's a penny to cut from our welfare budget, even though the welfare budget has ballooned post-COVID, and we propose to help get those people back into work. They don't believe that there's a penny to be cut from the size of the civil service, even though it's much larger than it was prior to COVID. So they're prepared to make any of the spending reductions we've outlined in detail for our fully funded tax reduction plans. And instead, as with every single Labour government in history, we believe they'll introduce policies which not only put up taxes, but also leave more people unemployed. And every Labour government in history has left more people on the dole. We think they'll do that again. We can explain why, because they'll introduce things like French-style union laws, which mean that in the end people lose their jobs, not gain jobs. And that is why we're warning of the risks and the dangers of a Starmer government.
I just want to remind you of something that the Institute for Fiscal Studies have said, their words. So you're saying, aren't you, that pensioners are going to pay more tax under Labour, but the IFS says that since your party came into office, the number of over 65s paying income tax has risen from 48% to 65%. They also say that since Parliament started in 2019, we have seen the biggest tax take of any Parliament in modern history. So how then can you tell voters that only Labour would raise taxes?
I don't remember any other government in 100 years who had to deal with COVID, and it's very convenient for Labour and others to suddenly forget of the extraordinary costs, not just of COVID, but a war in Europe, the energy price spike, where we were paying half of people's electricity energy bills the winter before last. So it's very convenient to forget about £500 billion of unexpected spending that any government would have had to put up with. But look, we've got through that. We stabilized the economy, brought inflation back down to normal levels, and have started already to cut tax, 4p already off national insurance. So people can tell where we are, where the Conservatives are, where our hearts are, and it's to reduce the taxes on hard-working families. I'm afraid Labour's every instinct is to increase your tax, as I've explained, on your home and your job and your car and your pension. And that would just be the start of it. And they say themselves they have more spending plans, but not even put into their manifesto. That's what Wes Streeting, their health spokesman, said just yesterday. So
Mr.
they're not
Shapps,
being open and honest about it. And they'll cost you a lot more.
Mr. Shapps, here we are halfway through the general election campaign. How likely do you feel it is that you might win?
Well, we are fighting for every single last vote. And no
But how
one has
likely do you
voted
think that
yet.
is?
Well, look, I'm entirely realistic about this. I know that we are the underdogs, but I still believe that it is possible for us to win. I also believe it would be incredibly dangerous for this country to give a blank check to Starmer, give him a supermajority, and let him get on with taxing people in every single direction. And as I said, putting people's jobs at risk, which is what every Labour government has done in the past with more people unemployed. So I still believe that we can do this. I agree that it's tough. I understand that, but I think that it is important that we get out and we present our positive picture, our positive vision for Britain, which includes £17 billion of lower taxation on hard-working people and their families.
Let me rephrase my question. How likely is it that Labour are going to win this election?
Well, I can't put odds. I accept we're the underdogs, but I still think we can do it. And I really think it's important to warn people that voting any other way apart from Conservative guarantees you the Labour Starmer government. Now, if that's what you want, then fine. But actually, if you don't relish the idea of Starmer coming in, raising your taxes, having no plan for illegal migration, introducing French-style labour laws, which leads to more people being unemployed, than voting any other way other than Conservative would be dangerous, because it would allow Starmer a blank check to do those things and many other things besides.
It's interesting, isn't it, that we're talking this morning not about an announcement of any Tory policy or ideas that you might have, but we're talking this morning about Labour, we're talking about the opposition. Front page of lots of the papers this morning, front page of the Times, go for the jugular, Sunak urged. Are you changing tactics? Is this a week where we might see the policy in terms of campaigning aimed more at Keir Starmer personally than previously?
Well, look, we said we'd have bold ideas, and we've actually released a lot of those. I think I would say if you look at our ideas, our manifesto, we're the ones, despite actually 14 years, who are storming ahead with lots of new ideas for this country. Labour have had 14 years to think of something. You talk about change, and as people on the doorsteps in my constituency, well, in Hatfield, say to me all the time, well, we don't understand what this change is that he's after, because he's just not told you. So it is right that we highlight the risks of an unchecked Labour majority if that were to happen. And this morning, in particular, we're pointing out that there's £4.5 billion of extra costs through their policy on energy, which is to not bring the oil and gas from the North Sea. Instead, buy it in from abroad, buy it in more expensively, not get the £4.5 billion of tax that we'd get from getting it here, and doubling the amount of CO2 because you have to transport it and it's not dug as efficiently. So, I mean, those are the sorts of crazed policies that Labour are putting forward that are going to, in the end, I'm afraid, cost us all significantly more. And I think, you're right, it's important that we highlight those things to the public because people need to know what they would be getting, which is a heck of a lot more tax to pay in every direction.
Labour, meanwhile, say that their policy on North Sea oil actually would be funded by their plans through bigger windfall taxes on the big energy companies. Grant Shapps, we must leave it there. Thank you very much indeed for your time this morning. Thank you.
Thank you.